Thank you so much for staying with us. This is Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now to our interview with the second guest of the day. I am joined by the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale, tonight to discussing President Tinubu's India mission. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Always a pleasure having you on the Politics Tonight. Thank you.
Good evening to you, my sister, and good evening to all of our viewers. Thank you for having me.
Right. The president is in India for the G20 summit. What's the significance for the country?
Well, I think the significance truly is multiple-fold. On the one hand, you have His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu making landmark progress. It would take a very deep dive back into our history to think of a time in which a head of state in Nigeria went overseas and secured $14 billion worth of investment pledges in a period of 2 days, as Mr. President has just done in India. Aside from, and we'll go into the specifics of that in a moment, aside from that, the president has made it very clear around the world, the reports are coming in that the Nigerian president means business. He is not attending a summit to appear to be fraternizing with people. He's not attending a summit to be part of some cool kids club. He is attending a summit with business on his mind, with one focus, which is attracting new industries, factories, and facilities and investments to Nigeria to add new jobs for Nigerians and to expand the revenue generation base through increased, tax revenue for, enhanced revenues for public service delivery. This is the focus of the president. And so if you appreciating that part of it, you now look at the other part of it, which is that the president is also making clear that not only does Nigeria mean business, but that its role geopolitically as the leader of West Africa and as the largest democracy in Africa and the largest economy in Africa, that we must now have a frontline seat at every meaningful global table. And that is the message Mr. President is bringing to the G20.
Right. Now, one of the highlights of this visit is the Memorandum of Understanding with Anduja Group for investment in Nigeria and automobile industry. What are the prospects for manufacturers in the country?
The prospects are deep and wide-ranging. So I'm just going to take a moment to kind of incisively go into what it is His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has achieved for Nigeria over the last 2 days. First and foremost, the president, through his personal intervention, I did have the privilege of being in the room when His Excellency Mr. President, certain investors, and I can say that the president was able to deal with those very specific issues that.
Are you there? Mr. Ajuri, can you hear me?
Hello?
All right, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that momentary disconnection. So he took the time to not only engage with over 20 Indian industrialists and chief executives from major industries across multiple sectors, but then it went one-on-one, had one-on-one engagements with each of these investors to ensure that the specific areas of concern that they raised directly with the president, he was in the room with them telling them, look, I want to link you up with this minister, this official, that official. Whatever encumbrance is in your way, is in the way of the success of your company doing business in Nigeria, I, as president, will ensure that it's removed. And that's the kind of hands-on leadership that we are now, going to be benefiting from to attract further investments in the country. But specifically now, you had essentially the Indorama, which is a company that obviously deals with fertilizer production and the production of petrochemicals. They came to the president with a specific request with respect to an intervention that needed to be made by the NNPCL. The president calls NNPCL, the GCEO Mele Kyari, into his office and says, look, This is my expectation. I want this solved. Within 3 weeks, that problem, that bottleneck was crushed. And now, as a result of that intervention by Mr. President, that we have now secured an $8 billion investment from Indorama to expand their petrochemical and fertilizer production facility in the country. That's number one. Number two, there was another investor by the name of Jitendra Sachdeva, who is the CEO of Skipper Seal Power Company Limited. Effectively, he had an investment of about $1.6 billion hanging as a result of a bottleneck that he found in the system of bureaucracy that we have, that he now brought to the president. And within about 10 minutes with the president absolutely destroyed that bottleneck. So as a result of that intervention, personal intervention by the president, we've unlocked a $1.6 billion investment that's basically going to see to the establishment of 20 100 megawatt power stations across states of northern Nigeria. So that is going to be extremely important, not just in terms of the FDI itself, but also in terms of further power generation and energizing industry across the north, similar to what you now have in the south. So that's going to be important. In addition to that, the president finalized on a $1 billion defense agreement, essentially that will see to the resuscitation and rejuvenation of the Defense Industries Corporation of Nigeria, DICON, basically a partnership with the managing arm of the military-industrial complex of the Indian Armed Forces. That partnership is going to allow DICON to attain 40% self-sufficiency in the local production and manufacturing of the defense equipments and requirements it needs within the country, meaning that obviously we're going to crash the level of import of defense equipment from other parts of the world. This is very strategic. I can tell you exclusively, this is the first time this will be known, but tonight, just a few hours ago, about 9 or 10 o'clock local time in New Delhi, Mr. President welcomed another set of investors who essentially are providing solutions that have to do with new aircrafts across the board. And I can't be too specific, but specific enough to say that the president he has gone beyond the point of saying we need to, bring in fighter jets from India or bring in fighter jets from the United States. What he is now saying and what he is now demanding of his partners is saying anyone who wants to bring these things into Nigeria must now develop the entire ecosystem of sustainability within Nigeria so that we don't just have the item and then we have to look to India and other countries when it's time for maintenance and other things. We have those things in the country with the facilities, all of the entire integrated ecosystem in the country so that we can sustain them, maintain them with Nigerian labor, with Nigerian-made parts, etc. That is the future that Mr. President is building for us with the interventions he's making with investors from India. And again, $14 billion just from Indian investors alone in the last 2 days. He hasn't even started going around the world. The president's aspirations are big. He's delivering on them, and he's proving once again why it is that what he achieved as governor of Lagos, he will achieve it for the entire Nigerian Federation as president. And we're looking forward to seeing how everything unfolds.
I'm sure Nigerians are very, very happy with this development. But what other areas of mutual interest and investments is the delegation from Nigeria focusing on at the summit?
Yes, it's a great question. So I've just touched on just a few items. There are several other investments that make up the $14 billion. But let me also say that aside from the direct financial FDI pledges from these investors, there were also three very important MOUs that were signed, government-to-government agreements. Essentially, two of them have to do with digital economic transformation. Right now, India boasts of one of the greatest, most developed digital infrastructure footprints of any country in the world, rivaling China and getting up there in competition with the United States. Not just in terms of the quality of their digital infrastructure, but also in terms of the quantity and scope of reach. You're talking about a country that has, a population of well over 1 billion people, right? So they have to do it at scale. We are a country of 200 million people that will eventually be 450 million people over the next 20 years. So we also are looking at how to scale up quality digital infrastructure. So it was only natural under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu that the Ministry of Communications, Innovation, and Digital Economy has now signed an MOU with the Indian Ministry of Electronics and Communications and Innovation to essentially share their essentially their entire blueprint of digital economic transformation between governments, so that we can adapt their best practices, learn from their failures, and be able to skip steps of development as a result of the learnings from their failures while applying their successes according to the nuances and peculiarities of the Nigerian digital infrastructural ecosystem. So we have two MOUs that deal with that, government to government on digital infrastructure. The third one is very important. The third one is under the Federal Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, which is an MOU signed with the Indian government's Investment Promotion and Trade Facilitation Agency, known as Invest India. Now, effectively, what that MOU does is it's an MOU between the Infrastructure Corporation of Nigeria and Invest India. But what it does is that it's going to mobilize capital toward very specific and targeted physical infrastructure projects in Nigeria, with combined assets from Indian business people and the Indian government to be able to invest in critical public infrastructure in Nigeria, which will obviously reduce the burden of expenditure on our own kind of public purse with respect to how we're going to develop our infrastructure. Will allow us to do more quickly, because we're going to be sharing that burden with Invest India and the opportunities that they're going to have. That's physical infrastructure: roads, bridges, airports, seaports, power plants, and the like. But it also deals with digital infrastructure. So we're going to provide a platform for them to be able to mobilize Indian industrialists to be able to further, invest in the digital infrastructure ecosystem within Nigeria. And we happen to be very fortunate that His Excellency Mr. President has appointed a Minister of Communications and Digital Economy that is inspiring so much confidence right now as we visited our Indian counterparts, because of his transformative track record in the private sector as somebody who has developed innovation hubs across the African continent. So people are ready to work with Dr. Bosun Tijani under the leadership of President Tinubu, and we're beginning to see a lot of fruit from those engagements. But there, again, I want to emphasize, all that I've described, which is so much, is only the first leg of this trip. We have not even concluded yet. Saturday and Sunday is the actual G20 summit that we're here to participate in. Everything that I've just described are preliminary sideline, initiatives of His Excellency Mr. President, out of his proactive spirit and intention to develop our country quickly through the promotion and attraction of foreign direct investment. But when we get to the G20, what you're going to now have are bilateral meetings between His Excellency Mr. President and his counterparts, such as German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, such as with South Korean President Yeol, such as with Brazilian President Lula da Silva, and they are going to be coming to the G20 with their investors. So we are just getting started in terms of what is on the table for Nigeria to grab. And the reason why this is all happening now in a way that we've not seen before is because this is the first time in our nation's history where we have a bona fide businessman who understands, as both a president and previously as a subnational administrator, what the various levels of our federal system, what the various complexities are and potential encumbrances and roadblocks are for doing business in the country, because he's been a governor and now he's been a president and he's been a businessman. He knows the language of business people. He's speaking it to them, and now they are listening.
So let's talk about the president's delegation. On that entourage are several captains of industry. Why such a big delegation?
Well, let's be clear about something now. When we talk about delegations, let's be clear about what's publicly funded and what's not publicly funded. We are not paying for the private jet trips of Nigeria's most successful business people to come to India. They are footing their own bills. They're flying on their own jets at their own expense, booking their own hotels on their own expense. That has nothing to do with government financing or government funding. I want to make that very clear. Secondly, it's important for us to have as many Nigerian captains of industry as possible on the ground because it is through that process of cross-fertilization that you're able to create these win-win partnerships with Nigerian entrepreneurial capital in addition to Indian entrepreneurial capital that will allow you to develop the kinds of mega projects and mega investments that will lead to large-scale employment opportunities for unemployed Nigerian young people across our country. Nobody, the president is very clear about this, whether it is his government team, his cabinet, or whether it is his approach to the private sector. You do not get to your point of destiny as an individual without the help of other people. That applies to us as individuals, where all of us need somebody to help our destinies, to lift us up from one level to another. Everybody needs that. The same thing happens at a national scale. Nations grow because people partner to make nations grow. So this is what the president believes in, teamwork to achieve a joint task. He did it in Lagos with an effective team made up of people, of Nigerians from all parts of the country. He's doing it again as president on a larger scale with more power and more resources and more ability to remove those bottlenecks and stumbling blocks from growth and foreign direct investment. He's doing it now. We are seeing the results already, and he is just getting started.
So let's go back to the G20 summit scheduled for this weekend, but specifically the membership discussion. Will the G20 summit agree to admit Nigeria as a member as being demanded?
What we do not think is wise at this juncture is to preempt a process that has not yet played itself out. What the president is very clear about and what he's very pragmatic about is the need to consult very widely before taking very important decisions. He is someone who believes in the power of consensus, in the power of hearing everybody's idea at the table before arriving at an informed decision. So we are currently having wide-ranging consultations from within the government, across branches of the government. And when those consultations are completed, the president will take a final decision on whether or not Nigeria will apply formally for membership of the G20. But I think it goes without saying that any entity, any organization that is made up of 80% of global GDP, that is made up of 75% of total global trade, that is made up of 60% of the world's population, that is an entity and an organization that you would be foolhardy not to at least consider joining. So we are considering it, we're consulting, and at the right time, the president will take a decision. But I do believe that given the central role Nigeria's economy will be playing globally over the course of the next 25 to 50 years, it's a no-brainer that as Africa's largest democracy and as Africa's largest economy, and as a nation that will eventually have the third largest population in the world by the end of this century, that we are at the front lines of every global conversation, at every meaningful global table, of which the G20 is just one.
Right. So while we wait for the outcome of the consultations, but do you think Nigeria has the economic potential to join the group, or just by name?
Oh, certainly not. There's no such thing as joining the G20 by name. You're either at the table or you're not at the table. If you're at the table, then you're going to enjoy all the full benefits of membership, just as all G20 members do currently enjoy. So there's no way around that. India was once in our position. India was once a promising democracy, a promising economy with a large market and a large population. But they did not have the leadership that was able to take advantage of all of those benefits and characteristics to turn it into what it now is. Fortunately for India, over the course of the last 10 years or so, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they have found the leadership, the visionary leadership, the practical and pragmatic leadership to take the right decisions needed to enhance public infrastructure, to unite the country, to create hundreds of billions of dollars worth of new foreign direct investment across sectors that has now led India to be a frontline member of the G20, that has made India one of the largest fastest growing economies in the world and one of the largest economies in the world, a multi-trillion-dollar economy. And we believe that Nigeria has all of the similar benefits. We have a successful diaspora that can bring the country hundreds of billions of dollars annually when we get our act fully together. We have a massive market with a demographic dividend of young people making up 70% of the future and present population. We have everything required to be what India has become. And I believe most global forecasters and wise geopolitical strategists understand what Nigeria will mean to the global economy in the future. But our job now is to move very swiftly from promise and potential into actualization and prosperity. And that is the focus of the president, who did the same in Lagos and will now do the same for Nigeria.
Right. So before I let you go, Mr. Ngelale, the president's victory has been upheld by the Presidential Election Petitions Court. How would you react to that? Expected, right?
Well, not only was it expected, we've said from the beginning, very coolly, very calmly, and very consistently, that you cannot have an election where the incumbent president loses his state for the first time in his political career, where the presidential candidate of the governing party loses his state for the first time in his political career, and you'll now say that that election was rigged. It simply doesn't make any sense. An election in which the national chairman at that time of the ruling party lost his own Senate seat, and people are saying that election was rigged. And when we've asked the question, what is your evidence? The court process that played out through the tribunal proceedings clearly proved that not only was there a total deficit of black and white evidence that they could point to as a merit in their case, in their petition, but we have now seen that almost all grounds on which they were standing have been totally and thoroughly cast out as a nullity. So when we've seen the kind of a thorough judgment that we saw, a 12-hour judgment, essentially a reading, point by point, letter by letter, in its thoroughness, we would now know that any attempt now, and we totally respect the legal right of all political gladiators to go to the Supreme Court to exercise their rights under the Constitution and under our electoral laws. But even as they do so, if you looked at that judgment and the thoroughness with which the grounds of their petitions were thrown out, you would now know that they're probably wasting their time and money. But we look forward to meeting them at the apex court if that's what they so decide.
All right. So what aspects of that judgment was most significant for you?
Well, I don't know if there's one. I think if there was anything that stuck out to me as extremely significant, it is the nearly unanimous rejection of almost all grounds on which they were standing. I mean, if you look at the kinds of abstract, empty positions they were taking. I mean, the notion, for example, just as one example, that voters in FCT are somehow supreme and superior to other Nigerian citizens voting in other non-FCT states. I think that notion runs contrary to the basis of our citizenship in this country, the basis of federal character, the basis of the constitutional rights accorded to the citizens of our great nation. So seeing that thrown out was not a surprise. What was a surprise to us was the fact that certain presidential candidates thought that that was the basis on which they would climb into power from the back door. We always thought that that was a ridiculous argument, that the FCT is some kind of super entity, some super state, super unit, and we're glad that some clarity has now been brought to what we thought was a ridiculous assertion in the first place.
During Ngelale, special advisor to the president on media and publicity. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for always bringing us up to speed with happenings within the purview of the presidency. Thank you so much. Thank you.